Right, good afternoon everybody. Very, very happy to be here this afternoon in this lovely setting with a beautiful sunshine outside. I think it's the first time I've ever been to Dublin where we've had such lovely weather. So, although London hasn't been much better in the last few months either. I want to talk about the member state initiative on this North Seas offshore grid project. I will be very brief because previous speakers have stolen a lot of my thunder. I don't need to sort of labour the points over again. You already know all about the initiative, and I think I can probably whiz through the presentation rather quickly. You all know we've signed this MOU. You probably don't know that the idea came from the Belgian government, which might surprise you. But somebody has to start these things off, and the Belgian minister, who is still there, even though they haven't got a government, is very keen on a low-carbon agenda. And I think conscious of the fact that Belgium's renewable potential is relatively limited, I was looking quite forward-thinking, thinking that he's going to have to benefit from other renewable resources elsewhere in Europe under the joint projects or statistical transfer flexibilities in the Renewables Directive. And I think Luxembourg is in the same position where they're looking to other countries' resources to help them meet their low-carbon targets. So the initiative came from a rather to my mind, unexpected source, but it was a very welcome initiative, and all the 9 other ministers responded very enthusiastically to this suggestion. And we signed the MOU last December. As you can see, it's all the countries around the North Sea and the Irish Sea and a bit of the Baltic as well. And the MOU has a lot of very fine phrases in it, but basically what it's saying is that we recognise the tremendous potential that our area has in respect to renewable resources, and that if we are collectively to move towards this low-carbon future that our governments have committed to, that we need to maximise the resource available in the most cost-efficient way. And, of course, developing the renewable resource inevitably means developing the underpinning infrastructure, which is the grids, which has already been said. We have to transport these resources, which are very often in rather remote areas of the country, to where they're needed. And that is an equally big challenge, if not a bigger challenge than building the renewable resources themselves. And if we are working together, we're working across borders, there will be mismatches between our regulatory legal regimes, and we don't do anything the same. Every country has got slightly different approaches. Even within countries, you have different approaches. So it is quite a challenge to coordinate our development. And so we decided to set up this 2-year programme of more detailed work to investigate the potential of this vision. We have committed to report to our ministers on a regular basis. We're going to submit our first report in June this year, a more detailed report by the end of this year, and then the final report at the end of 2012. As Mr. Adamowitsch has already said, we've set up 3 working groups, one to look at the more technical issues, looking at the what an offshore integrated grid might look like technically, looking at the possible configurations of the grid, looking at the technology that would be required, some of which does not exist at the moment. It will have to be developed. If you're linking up wind farms together or with interconnectors going to different countries, you do need technology that has not been developed to date. And that is why we very much welcome working with Mr. Adamowitsch's group, because he has all the technical experts, manufacturers, system operators, developers who've got the expertise there that can contribute to our work. And at the last meeting, they offered their support to this, particularly to this working group, where we do need technical expertise. And that is being co-chaired by Denmark and the Netherlands. The second working group is looking at market and regulatory issues, and Martin and myself are co-chairing that group. And that is looking at the various regulatory regimes in the member countries, and looking at how well they mesh together, and what we would need to do if we wanted to collaborate on joint projects with 2, 3 or more countries. Inevitably, there are going to be accommodations that will have to be made. So we are initially looking at where those obstacles might be. This year, we're looking at that, and that's a relatively easy part. And then next year, we'll have to work out how we solve these prospective barriers. And the last working group is looking at the equally difficult area of how do you build this infrastructure if you decide to go ahead. The planning procedures will be different in the different member countries, and you've got the public acceptance problems to sort out as well. So these working groups are looking at 3 key issues. We have a structure, we have a programme board, which the aim of the programme board is to bring the strands of all this work together so that we're all marching in the same direction, that we are coordinating our work and that we're not overlapping or, even worse, conflicting with each other. And then the steering committee at senior level in our ministries then reports to our ministers. I should say at the outset that we're not sort of assuming that integrated offshore development of grids is the way forward. We think it probably is, because it seems a natural way to go forward. It seems to be a more cost-effective way of developing the infrastructure if you work together and don't do it on a national basis. And there's no doubt that if we don't do anything, that all the offshore wind farms will connect directly to shore. So you will have a lot of point-to-point connections all the way around the North Sea. That doesn't seem a rational development. But we are cautious civil servants in this initiative who have to report to our ministers and tell them how much all this is going to cost, and assure them that the cost is outweighed by the benefits to consumers. So an important part of the work that we will be doing is looking at the cost benefit of various scenarios of grid development. Which is going to be a challenge, but I don't think that we can commit politically until we have some idea of the costs and benefits of this kind of massive investment. As I say, we're assuming that joint working is more cost efficient, but we do need to produce evidence for our ministers. We're hoping at the end of the 2 years that we can then make a political statement of the vision that we have and the way forward that we would like to see, which should give signals to investors, we hope. Right, now it's already been mentioned about this regional approach, and I fully agree that the Commission originally, I think, was not too keen on regional approaches a few years ago. They saw this as a way of getting out of the sort of single market project. It was an easy way out, so yeah, I'm sure that's what they were thinking. Our view was never that, hand on heart. We always thought that a regional approach was the only practical way forward, because we'd had an example of joining up our Scotland and England and Wales electricity markets in GB, which took 3 or 4 years and was extremely complicated. And we thought, my golly, we're trying to do this across the whole of Europe. We're not going to be able to do this in one go. We're going to have to do it piece by piece. So the UK has always been very supportive of this regional approach, and I think now that it's generally accepted that integrating regional markets is the important first step to integrating the whole of Europe. So the initiative is an extremely good example of regional cooperation, which is encouraged under the third package. We have got all the stakeholders involved in the project. We've got obviously the ministries, but we have incredibly good support from the regulators who are doing fantastic work, particularly in our working group on the regulatory environment. We've got the system operators who are doing similarly fantastic work in the first working group on the technical aspects. We've got very sterling support from the Commission, without whose support, with this project would not proceed as well as it is doing. And then we have all the stakeholders, and we rely on input from the stakeholders, obviously, particularly developers who are actually trying to do something out there. And we very much welcome input from developers or potential developers with their experience of some of the obstacles that are out there. There is a similar, this has already been pointed out in the slides, Mr. Adamowitsch's slides, that there's another regional initiative which is adjacent to us, which is the Baltic Energy Market Interconnection Plan, BMIP, which is looking at slightly different issues. It's looking more at the interconnection, joining up the markets rather than integrating offshore renewables. But it's a contiguous area. They obviously have experience that will be relevant to the work that we're doing, and we are very much hoping that later on in the year we can get together with the Baltic countries in that initiative to share experience. And I believe Mr. Adamowitsch is going to pay a visit to the Baltic countries, hopefully, to help us with that joining up of these two initiatives. And both regions, as you've already seen from the map, are priority corridors in the Commission's infrastructure communication. Now, the title of my presentation was Implications for the European Energy Market. Now, I think that although we are looking at a particular regional challenge, that the issues we're looking at and the solutions that we will hopefully come up with will be extremely relevant to wider EU policy. When you look at some of the issues that we're looking at, first of all, we've got this knotty problem of how you allocate the cost and the benefit of cross-border projects, which is an issue that we're looking at in my working group, our working group. Sorry, Martin. Martin doesn't normally, he's not normally with me when I speak about this initiative, so I have to be careful what I say. But it is an extremely good example of very fruitful Anglo-Irish cooperation, I can assure you. So I think the work that we're doing on the cost allocation will be of wider EU interest, and the identification of the costs and benefits, which plays into that. And then we have another knotty problem of the impact of renewable support schemes in the various countries. That will clearly have an impact on the investment decisions, and we will have to consider that. The planning barriers, which we've already spoken about, the physical planning barriers. This question of anticipatory investment, if you are planning for the future, and are not just doing point-to-point connections, but you're looking ahead to possible developments and for example, putting in bigger cables to facilitate the linking up of other projects later on, where you've got the possible risk of stranded investment, which regulators are always very concerned about. And we're going to have to work with the regulators to see how we cope with that, because I think the government's view is that without some degree of anticipatory investment, this isn't actually going to work. But we appreciate the risk to consumers of bearing the cost of this. So that's another issue that I think will have wider resonance. And then, of course, there are the technological challenges, which I hope our experience will be helpful in other regions with similar technologies. And the other benefit of our initiative, I think, is that we have got real experience in this region of actually doing this. A number of the countries in the initiative are building offshore, have already come up against practical problems and have found a way around them. We have got some real case studies that we can look at, which is invaluable. There's no substitute for looking at real issues, real case studies to learn lessons from them. So that is another area of work that we are going to look at a number of case studies, a small number, 1 or 2, to try and learn the lessons from those. If Europe as a whole is going to meet its low carbon objectives by 2030, 2050, and also integrate its markets, we are going to need a lot of infrastructure investment, which has already been mentioned just now. There's the physical problems of building across borders, but there's also the financial implications and the regulatory implications. And I hope that we will throw up experience on these issues as well in our work. And then another sort of knotty problem, which is going to have to be tackled sooner or later, is how you resolve the conflict, potential conflict between the renewables directive, which gives priority access to renewables. If you join up with an interconnector, how do you resolve potential impact of the congestion management guidelines, which do not give priority to renewables? So that is an obvious, quite difficult issue that I think we're going to have to resolve one way or the other, and we will need the Commission's support on that. And I see Patrick is scribbling furiously. We want to discuss that with the Commission services responsible for those 2 sets of legislation to see whether we can resolve that potential conflict. And then finally, as any of you who are familiar with the third package knows, we have got an enormous number of market and technical codes which are being developed under the third package, looking at a number, 11 or 12 areas in both electricity and gas. And a lot of them are very relevant to the work that we're doing in the initiative. And so we're hoping that we can feed in our ideas and our experience from this initiative in that broader work on codes for cross-border interactions across the EU, which is another reason why it's very important that the Commission is an active member of our initiative, as they are, so that we can not only input our ideas into the wider developments across the EU, but make sure that we're not working against the wider developments, that we are actually consistent with the general direction that we're taking across Europe. So there's a lot of sort of joined upness that we need to take care of here. I think that's me done. That was quick, wasn't it?